May 11th, 2020, 4:45 in the morning, Portland, Oregon. The COVID-19 pandemic is raging. The world feels uncertain, scary, isolated. Sarah Morrison wakes up in her bed. Something is wrong. She hears a sound. Her husband David is snoring. But it's not normal snoring. It's something she'll later learn is called agonal breathing, the sound a body makes when it's dying. Sarah rolls over and touches David's shoulder. He doesn't respond. She shakes him. Nothing. She turns on the light. David's lips are blue. His face is gray. His body is rigid. Her husband, 35-year-old Dr. David Morrison, an ophthalmologist, her college sweetheart, the father of her 2 daughters sleeping in the rooms down the hall, is dying in their bed. Sarah grabs her phone and dials 911. Her hands are shaking. The dispatcher answers. "My husband, he's not breathing. I think he's having a heart attack. Please, I need help." The 911 dispatcher's voice is calm, professional. "Ma'am, I need you to start CPR. Can you do that?" Sarah has never performed CPR in her life. She has a master's degree in cognitive neuroscience and social psychology. She works in marketing and communications. She's not a doctor. She's not a nurse. She's just a wife and mother who woke up to find her husband dying. But she doesn't have a choice. The dispatcher talks her through it. Put the phone on speaker. Place your hands in the center of his chest. Push hard and fast. Don't stop. Sarah starts compressions. David's chest is hard, rigid. She's pushing with everything she has, but it feels like she's barely making an impact. 1, 2, 3, 4. The dispatcher is counting with her. Keep going. Don't stop. Push harder. Sarah's arms are burning. Her shoulders are screaming. She's crying, but she doesn't stop. She can't stop. If she stops, David dies. Upstairs, their 8-year-old daughter and 5-year-old daughter are sleeping. They have no idea that downstairs their mother is fighting to save their father's life. And Sarah is grateful for that. Because what she's seeing, what she's doing, no child should ever witness. 5 minutes pass, then 7, then 10. 10 minutes of CPR, 10 minutes of pushing on her husband's chest, watching his blue lips, wondering if this is how their story ends. If this is how her daughters lose their father. If this is how she becomes a widow at 35. The paramedics arrive. Sarah hears them at the door, but she can't let David go to open it. She can't stop the compressions, not even for a second. She hears a crash. The paramedics have kicked in the front door. They rush in and take over. Sarah stumbles back, her arms shaking, her whole body trembling. The paramedics are moving fast, attaching equipment, preparing the defibrillator. "Clear!" someone shouts. "Thunk!" Sarah hears David's body slam against the floor as the electric shock hits him, and then she runs upstairs to check on her daughters. Please, God, let them still be asleep. Let them not have heard any of this. They're sleeping, peacefully, beautifully sleeping. Sarah whispers a prayer of thanks. She calls her parents, who live nearby. She calls David's parents. She packs a hospital bag because she has to believe, she has to hope, that he'll need it, that he'll wake up, that this won't be the end. The paramedics bring David downstairs. One of them, Lieutenant Greg, takes Sarah aside. "Your husband went into ventricular fibrillation," he tells her. "Cardiac arrest. We've got him stabilized, but we need to get him to the hospital immediately." Cardiac arrest. David's heart stopped. For how long before Sarah woke up? How long was his brain without oxygen? Will he have brain damage? Will he even survive? "What do I tell my kid?" Sarah asks. It's the only question she can think of. Lieutenant Greg gives her advice that she'll never forget. Tell them the truth, but make it age appropriate. Their dad got sick and needed equipment we don't have at home, so we took him to the hospital to help him. The ambulance leaves with David. Sarah's mother arrives to stay with the girls. Her father drives her to the hospital, and that's when the trauma really begins. It's May 2020, the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hospitals are locked down. Visitors aren't allowed. Families can't be with their loved ones. Sarah arrives at the hospital and is directed to a radiology waiting room. She's told she has to wait there. She can't see David. She can't be with him. Hospital staff will update her when they can. The radiology waiting room has no cell phone service. Read that again. Sarah's husband is dying somewhere in this hospital. She just performed 10 minutes of CPR on him. She has no idea if he's alive or dead. And she can't call anyone, can't text anyone, can't Google what ventricular fibrillation means, can't do anything except sit alone in a room with no windows and wait. That was almost as traumatizing as the cardiac arrest itself, Sarah would later say. Now he is in dire straits fighting for his life, and I can't even get to see him. Hours pass. Finally, a doctor comes to find her. David is alive. They've cooled his body. Therapeutic hypothermia to protect his brain from damage after the cardiac arrest. He'll be kept in a medically induced coma for a while. They won't know the extent of any brain damage until they warm him up and see if he can follow commands. Sarah goes home. There's nothing else she can do. She can't be with her husband. She can't hold his hand. Can't talk to him. Can't do anything except wait and hope and pray. When David is finally warmed and brought out of the coma, Sarah gets a call. He can follow commands. He's responding. They can do a FaceTime call. Sarah holds her phone with trembling hands and looks at her husband's face on the screen. He's intubated, surrounded by machines, but his eyes are open. And she sees it, the sparkle in his eye. He's still in there. Her David is still in there. That was the first moment that I felt like things might be okay, Sarah said. But here's what people don't understand about trauma. Here's what the medical system doesn't prepare you for. David survived. Against incredible odds, most people who have cardiac arrest at home don't make it to the hospital alive. And of those who do, many have severe brain damage. David survived intact. No brain damage. Full neurological recovery. It was, by every medical standard, a miracle. So why did Sarah feel like she was falling apart? For 6 months after David came home from the hospital, Sarah was in what she now recognizes as a dissociative PTSD state. She couldn't sleep. Every night she'd lie in bed listening to David breathe, terrified that he'd stop, terrified that she'd wake up again to that horrible sound of agonal breathing, terrified that next time she wouldn't be able to save him. She was exhausted, traumatized, barely holding it together. But when she looked for resources, for support, for anything that could help her understand what she was going through, she found nothing. Because in the medical system, patients are the ones who matter. Patients get the therapy, the support groups, the rehabilitation programs. Caregivers? Caregivers are expected to just be okay, to be strong, to be grateful that their loved one survived. But Sarah wasn't okay, and she wasn't just a caregiver. She was something else, something the medical system didn't even have a word for. She was a co-survivor. Think about it. David was unconscious during his cardiac arrest. He has no memory of it. For him, it's like he went to sleep and woke up in a hospital 5 days later. But Sarah? Sarah lived every second of it. She felt his rigid chest under her hands as she did compressions. She watched his blue lips. She heard his body slam against the floor when the defibrillator shocked him. She sat alone in that waiting room with no cell service, not knowing if her husband was alive or dead. David's life was in danger, but Sarah's life was shattered too. Their lives are so closely intertwined that what happened to him happened to her, just in a different way. I didn't personally have the pathology, Sarah explained, but all those things happened to me too. My life was just as upended as his because our lives are so closely intertwined. And here's the thing that makes this even more intense. This wasn't the first time. David had survived testicular cancer twice before, once during medical school, once during his ophthalmology residency. 2 separate primary cancers, not related to treatment. Just terrible, terrible luck. So by the time the cardiac arrest happened, Sarah had already been a caregiver twice. She'd already supported her husband through surgery and recovery, and the fear that comes with a cancer diagnosis. But the cardiac arrest was different, more traumatic, more sudden, more terrifying. And through all of it, through 2 cancer diagnoses and a cardiac arrest, Sarah was also raising 2 young daughters, building her own career, and being married to medicine through David's entire medical training journey and beyond. The medical system had no support for what she was going through. No recognition of the trauma she'd experienced. No acknowledgement that she was suffering too. So Sarah did what she had to do. She found her own way through, and in the process, she became an advocate for the millions of people like her. The co-survivors, the caregivers, the partners and spouses and family members who live through medical trauma alongside their loved ones, but are invisible to the healthcare system. Let's rewind for a moment, because to understand how David and Sarah survived everything they've been through, you need to understand something important. They've always used humor as a coping mechanism. When David was diagnosed with testicular cancer the first time, during his third year of medical school, he was 25 years old. He'd just gotten married to Sarah. They'd been together since college at Texas Tech University, and they'd both gone to Dartmouth for advanced degrees. Life was supposed to be beginning. Instead, David was facing cancer. He could have let it destroy him. Instead, he made jokes, dark jokes, medical jokes, jokes about being a medical student with testicular cancer. It was how he coped, how he processed, how he survived. 3 years later, during his ophthalmology residency, lightning struck twice. Another primary testicular cancer. Different from the first one, just terrible, terrible luck. Again, David used humor, and this time, he took it online. In 2016, bored at a research conference, David created a Twitter account. He called it Dr. Medicus, a playful name that reflected his medical background and comedic aspirations. David started making short comedy videos poking fun at different medical specialties. He'd play different characters: the overly confident surgeon, the exhausted emergency room doctor, the pathologist who never sees patients. His videos were funny, insightful, and absolutely resonated with medical professionals who saw themselves and their colleagues in his characters. By 2020, Dr. Medicus had millions of followers across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. David had become internet famous as a medical comedian. And Sarah? She joined Twitter too, with the handle Lady Medicus. Very creative, she admits. At first, she was just there to understand David's online world, to be part of the conversations he was having. But then she started roasting him. He was too beloved, Sarah joked. I was like, you guys, I can't deal with you just paying compliments to my husband all the time. We need to balance this out. So I started roasting him. The banter between Dr. Medicus and Lady Medicus became legendary. Their followers loved watching them tease each other, support each other, laugh together even through the hard times. When the pandemic hit in early 2020, David's comedy became a lifeline for healthcare workers drowning in the horror of COVID-19. His jokes and videos were a brief reprieve, a moment of laughter in the darkness. And then on May 11, 2020, David had his cardiac arrest. After David came home from the hospital, neurologically intact, physically recovering, miraculously okay, something shifted in their content. They'd always been honest online. They'd talked about David's cancer experiences. They'd shared the challenges of being married to a doctor, the toll of medical training, the reality of healthcare. But now they had something else to share, something more raw, more traumatic, more important. Sarah started talking about being a co-survivor, about performing CPR on her husband, about the PTSD she was experiencing, about the fact that the medical system had no support for people like her. And the response was overwhelming. Thousands of people reached out, other caregivers, other co-survivors, people who'd performed CPR on their loved ones, people who'd felt invisible, forgotten, unsupported by a healthcare system that only sees patients. I was looking for resources, support, answers, anything, Sarah said. Like, he survived, we're so lucky, so why do I feel so awful? And I couldn't find anything. So she became the resource she'd needed. She started speaking at medical conferences. She wrote articles. She gave interviews. She advocated for better support for caregivers and co-survivors. And she and David did something else. They turned their trauma into art. They created a podcast called Knock Knock Hi with the Medicus team, where they talk about medicine, healthcare, and their personal experiences with medical trauma. They use humor, but they also don't shy away from the hard truths. They developed a live stage show called Wife and Death telling their story with a mix of comedy and raw honesty that leaves audiences laughing and crying in equal measure. They continued making videos, but now with an added layer of advocacy and awareness. David's comedy evolved to include biting satire of the U.S. healthcare system, the gaps in care, the failures that hurt both patients and providers. And through it all, they showed something powerful. You can use humor to heal. You can laugh about trauma without diminishing it. You can be honest about darkness while still finding light. Here's something terrifying. To this day, no one knows why David went into cardiac arrest. There's no family history of heart problems. David was 35 years old in good health aside from the 2 cancer episodes. He exercised. He didn't smoke. There was no reason for his heart to suddenly stop beating in the middle of the night. After the cardiac arrest, the doctors did extensive testing, genetic testing, cardiac workups. They were looking for an answer, a cause, something that would explain why this happened. They found what's called a variant of unknown significance. David has it. His mother has it too. They don't know if it caused the cardiac arrest. They don't know if his daughters might have it. They don't know if it means anything at all. We are trying to learn to live with uncertainty, Sarah said. Think about what that means. Every night, Sarah goes to sleep next to her husband, not knowing if his heart will stop again. Every morning, she wakes up and checks to make sure he's breathing. They've bought an AED, an automated external defibrillator, for their home, just in case. Because lightning has struck David 3 times already, who's to say it won't strike a 4th? This is part of being a co-survivor that people don't talk about. It's not just about the trauma of what happened. It's about living with the ongoing fear that it could happen again. You can never unsee what it is that I'm seeing, Sarah said about that night, and I don't want to have my children see that. She's protecting her daughters from the full weight of what happened. They know their dad got sick. They know he had to go to the hospital. But they don't know that their mother spent 10 minutes doing chest compressions, watching their father's blue lips, wondering if she was going to have to tell them that morning that Daddy had died. And Sarah carries that burden alone. The weight of knowing, the weight of that image burned into her memory. The weight of listening to her husband breathe every night and being unable to fully relax, unable to stop being vigilant. This is what co-survivorship means. Sarah didn't set out to become a patient advocate, but after everything she'd been through, after searching desperately for support and finding nothing, she realized she had to be the change she wanted to see. She started small, talking openly on social media about her experience, using the term co-survivor to give a name to what she and millions of others were going through. The response was immediate and powerful. Caregivers and co-survivors reached out from all over the world. Finally, someone was saying what they'd been feeling. Finally, someone was acknowledging that they were suffering too. Sarah's advocacy grew. She became a keynote speaker at medical conferences, talking to doctors and nurses and healthcare administrators about the invisible population they were failing to serve. She received awards for her work, an EMS Cardiac Arrest Save Challenge coin in 2020, the Citizen CPR Foundation's 40 Under 40 Award in 2021, the American Heart Association's Resuscitation Champion Award in 2022. She serves as co-patient editor for the Journal of Cardiac Failure, writing editorials about the healthcare system from a patient and caregiver perspective. And she keeps pushing for change, for recognition of caregivers in medical settings, for support systems, for acknowledgement that when a patient experiences trauma, their loved ones experience it too. In a system designed to center only the patient, where does that leave the partner who's living through the trauma too? Sarah asks. And what happens when caregivers are treated as accessories to recovery rather than humans navigating shock, PTSD, and grief of their own? These are the questions that drive her advocacy. Meanwhile, David has used his platform in a different way. His Dr. Medicus videos now reach over 5 million people across social media platforms. He's been invited to give commencement addresses at medical schools, including Yale, University of Colorado, and University of Michigan. His comedy has become more pointed, more focused on the systemic failures in healthcare. He uses humor to start conversations about things that are broken, the insurance system, the administrative burden on doctors, the lack of support for mental health in medicine. Together, David and Sarah have created something unique, a media company called Medicus Media that uses humor and storytelling to humanize medicine and advocate for better care for everyone, patients, caregivers, and healthcare providers alike. So what's the secret? How did David and Sarah survive 2 cancer diagnoses and a cardiac arrest? How did they not just survive but thrive, building careers around advocacy and making a real difference in the world? The answer is simple and profound. They did it together. Listen to how Sarah talks about that night. I was looking for resources, support, answers, anything. Like, he survived, we're so lucky. So why do I feel so awful? She didn't hide her struggle. She didn't pretend to be okay when she wasn't. She was honest about her trauma, her PTSD, her fear. And David? He supported her back. He acknowledged what she'd been through. He used his platform to amplify her voice, to share her message, to make sure people understood that she'd saved his life. They created space for both of their experiences to be valid. David's near-death experience mattered. Sarah's trauma of watching it happen and literally bringing him back to life mattered too. This is what partnership looks like in the face of medical crisis. Not one person being strong while the other falls apart. Not one person being the patient while the other is relegated to just being the caregiver. Instead, they're both survivors. They're both changed by what happened. They both carry trauma, and they both support each other through it. Sarah coined the term co-survivor because she needed language to describe her experience. She needed people to understand that she didn't just help David survive, she survived too. And David embraced that language, that concept, that acknowledgement of what his wife went through. I essentially wasn't present during my cardiac arrest, David explains, and she brought me back. She is a co-survivor of this trauma. They've also been honest about the toll that medical training takes on relationships. Sarah supported David through medical school, residency, and building a practice. She had their first baby during his medical school years and their second during his residency. Against all best practices, as she jokes, she knows firsthand what it's like to be married to medicine, the long hours, the stress, the way the medical system treats doctors' families as afterthoughts. And they talk about all of it, openly, honestly, with humor, yes, but also with unflinching truth about what it's really like. This is why their story resonates with millions of people, because they're not pretending it's easy. They're not presenting a sanitized, perfect version of survival. They're showing the messy, complicated, sometimes funny, often painful reality. And they're showing that you can get through it, but not alone, never alone. Today, David and Sarah Morrison are thriving. David continues his work as an ophthalmologist while creating content as Dr. Medicus. Sarah runs their media company and advocates for caregivers and co-survivors worldwide. They're raising their 2 daughters, now teenagers, in a home that has an AED just in case. They're touring with their stage show, Wife and Death, telling their story to audiences across the country. They're making a difference, but they want you to know some important things. First, learn CPR. Sarah had never performed CPR before that night. She had no training, but the 911 dispatcher talked her through it, and she saved her husband's life. Anyone can learn CPR. Anyone can save a life. We're incredibly lucky because I woke up, Sarah says, but most people don't wake up in time. Most people don't have someone there who can perform CPR. Having an AED at home, knowing CPR, these things save lives. Second, if you're a caregiver or co-survivor, your trauma is real. Your experience matters. You're not just a caregiver. You're a co-survivor. You need support, therapy, recognition. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't pretend you're okay if you're not. 250 million people worldwide are caregivers, Sarah points out. You probably know at least one of them. I've been a caregiver. And speaking from experience, having a community, having people who understand, it makes all the difference. Third, humor heals. It doesn't diminish trauma. It doesn't make light of suffering, but it gives you a way to process, to cope, to connect with others who've been through similar things. We've always used comedy to cope, David explains. It's how I got through cancer twice. It's how we're getting through everything that's happened. You can laugh about the darkness and still honor how dark it was. Fourth, healthcare needs to change. The system needs to recognize caregivers and co-survivors. It needs to provide support, not just for patients, but for the families living through medical trauma alongside them. This is what David and Sarah are fighting for. This is why they share their story over and over in videos and podcasts and stage shows and keynote speeches, because they want to change the system. They want to make it better for the millions of people who will come after them. Fifth, and perhaps most important, you're stronger together than you are alone. David survived because Sarah woke up and performed CPR. Sarah survived her trauma because David supported her and amplified her voice. They both survived because they had each other. Our lives are so closely intertwined that what happened to him happened to me, Sarah says, just in a different way. That's the power of partnership. That's what it means to be stronger together. When David and Sarah stand on stage telling their story, they do it side by side. When they advocate for change in healthcare, they do it together. When they raise their daughters and run their company and create their content, they do it as a team. They've been through hell, twice diagnosed with cancer, cardiac arrest, 10 minutes of CPR, PTSD, trauma, uncertainty about the future. But they're still here, still fighting, still laughing, still loving each other, still making a difference. And they want you to know, if they can do it, you can too. Whatever you're facing, whatever medical crisis or trauma or impossible situation you're in, you can survive it. You can thrive. You can find purpose in your pain, but you don't have to do it alone. Reach out, ask for help, find your people, be honest about your struggle, and remember you're stronger together. David Morrison, Dr. Medicus, survived testicular cancer twice and cardiac arrest. Sarah Morrison, Lady Medicus, saved her husband's life and became a champion for co-survivors everywhere. Together, they've turned their trauma into advocacy, their pain into purpose, and their survival into a movement that's changing healthcare for millions. They're proof that love can be a lifeline, that partnership can carry you through the impossible, that you really are stronger together. Learn CPR, support caregivers, advocate for change, laugh when you can, love fiercely, and remember, you're never alone in this fight.